Welcome to Season 5 of Fulfilling Career Happy Life. I'm your host, Randi Roberts, Executive and Career Life Coach. This season, we're exploring one of the most misunderstood capabilities in leadership, courage. Not the dramatic kind, but the everyday courage to step into discomfort, speak up when it matters, make hard calls, and lead forward even when the path isn't clear. You'll hear from executives and coaches sharing real moments that tested them and shaped their careers. My hope is that each conversation invites you to reflect on your own relationship with courage, where it's serving you, and where a braver step may be just ahead. So let's get started. Hi, and welcome to Fulfilling Career Happy Life. I'm excited about the conversation today in our series about leadership courage. Because today I'm welcoming a colleague and someone I consider a friend, Samuele Butera. Samuele's got a really impressive background. He has a master in public policy from Harvard. He started his career at McKinsey doing consulting. And then he moved over to the pharma side where Samuele and my paths crossed. He started at Novartis doing some organizational redesign and then moved into the commercial side, taking on numerous different marketing leadership roles. He was then the head of the biopharmaceuticals business. He was global head of the first CAR T launch in the industry, which is a tremendous accomplishment. And currently, he's a senior executive at J&J. My experience with Samuele, and one of the reasons I'm so excited for this conversation today, is I vividly remember our first meeting, Samuele. We were working together, one of those lucky restructurings where I landed in the plum role of being Samuele's boss and just meeting him. And I vividly remember what struck me about Samuele. I mean, his reputation was being so smart and so effective and good in the organization. But what struck me about him as a person was his values alignment and how clear he is on who he is and what's important to him. And that leads so clearly into leadership courage that I'm really excited to have the conversation. So, Samuele, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Randy. And I remember the meeting too, and I am as lucky as you are, if not more, for meeting you. So thank you for having me here today as well.
It's my pleasure. In fact, it's interesting, not that I can take credit for any of it because it was all just luck, but I have a pretty impressive track record of having been the boss for people who are doing really big things now.
Well, that says something about you, right?
Well,
So,
I'll take it, but let's get down to work.
sure.
So, in our conversation about leadership courage, and the reason that we're focused on that this season is because it is something that comes up in conversations with my clients all the time, and it's questions I get when I'm out speaking and things like that that really come to that theme. And what I'd love to focus on with you, Samuele, is sort of how courage shows up in an organization and how it impacts the business. So let me start with maybe some examples or what your thoughts are around how courage accelerates the business outcomes that we're seeking.
Yeah, great question. And I think first and foremost, I think, as you said at the very beginning, I think it starts, what is courage, right? Maybe let's start there. And
Yeah,
then at least, a potential definition. And then how does that translate to the business and to impacts for the business, etc.
perfect.
So from my perspective, courage is the willingness to stand by values that you believe in, and not only stand by them, but act on them, even when standing by and acting on them might mean taking some significant risks, either from a professional perspective or from a personal perspective, and so on, right? So I think that is important because what that creates then is a situation where if you're clear about what you believe in and you behave in a way that is in line with what you believe in and what you say you believe in, which is an important piece,
Mhm.
then the teams over time will see whether you are true to that or not, right? And if you are, and you are in a position where some significant decisions have to be taken, and it could be simple things like a decision on for instance, on a campaign, or a hiring decision, right? Or it could be a very significant decision like, are we gonna enter a new market, or are we gonna restructure the team significantly, or are we gonna do a major acquisition or a divestiture or anything like that. If you have established a culture where your values are very clear and the team sees themselves also in those values, and the team sees you acting according to those values over and over, even when it's not in your own interest, then I think you have created something that is very lasting, because the organization says, hey, this person is saying this. I have, there's a track record there of consistent beliefs, consistent actions. And so I'm going to jump into the void, right, with that person, and trust that something good, will happen, or at least that the intentions are good, right? Because we can always control the outcomes,
Of course.
but at least the intentions are there, and they also probably know that during the journey, if there is need for help or assistance, etc., that will be provided, right? Even if maybe the outcome at the end might be something that no one had foreseen. So I think that's what I would say. And there's so many examples in today's world where you know leaders either do that or don't do that, and I think the difference is in the long-term outcomes, right? So I think leaders that take a more I would say you know intermediate point of view, meaning they maybe uh, they're clear about their values, but they don't really respect them in action, or take a lot of liberty and lack of consistency in how they implement them, uh, probably face some challenges, right, in the medium to long term. And I think if we're all about the long term and understand that the short term is very variable, consistency on values is ultimately, I think, what brings you the results that everybody wants to see, from the patients in a healthcare industry space to the company that is going to reap the benefits of a strategy and an execution that is consistent with the patient's need.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is so important, Samuele, because it goes to the core of who we are as people, and of course who we are as leaders. But the point you made is the consistency, because if we're true to our values and we're, as you mentioned, clearly communicating them and then backing it up with action in a consistent way, people know what to expect of you.
Right.
They anticipate the questions you're going to ask, the guidance you're going to provide, and they can feel sure um, that you're going to show up as yourself in every interaction. I think we've probably both worked with people who have struggled with leaders who are inconsistent. Wait a
Right.
minute. Which person's going to show up now? How am I going to
Right.
approach the situation? That can create its own drama too.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, and I think the teams also, they have it's very it's a classical thing, right? It's like the teams have a very very long-term memory, right? And it only takes one time where you show a different behavior, and they will say, "Oh, hey, you know what? Okay, then he or she is playing the politics game or whatever game they might be playing," instead of like, no, she said X, Y, and Z, and they're doing X, Y, and Z, even if it's their own cost, even if it's hard. And
Yeah.
and by the way, what I've seen happen in this situation, and it can be situations even like, um, people maybe having a different opportunity in a different part of the company or things like that, is that, um, you know, even if you are having a very difficult conversation with someone, um, if you've been clear with the values that you stand by and you've performed consistently, it's so much easier also to have these conversations, right? Because the person says, "Hey, you know what? You've been clear, you've been transparent, and I understand why we need to do what we need to do, and all the best, basically."
Yeah, and I think that's really important because especially in a big company, there are, no matter how high you go in the company, there are things that are in your control and things that aren't. There are going to be times where you have to implement a decision that maybe wasn't your recommendation. You've worked through the process and you get where you
Right.
need to go and you need to carry it forward. but an enormous difference if you take that forward to your team in a way that's inconsistent with how you've behaved.
Right.
They're going to wonder where you're coming from. Whereas if you just lead in a way that's candid, that's
Right.
honest, it doesn't mean throwing somebody else under the bus, but it's sharing, narrating the
Yep.
situation that you're in almost. What, and the question then becomes, how do we implement the decision through our values? Those are
Absolutely.
worlds apart.
Yeah, and I also think like it's because we talked about maybe some challenging situations, but there could be very challenging situations that have incredible potential. Like for instance, you enter a new space that could cure cancer, for instance, or you could take care of a major vaccine or whatever solution for patients you can think of that's never been done before. And in those situations, no one really knows, the script, right? So if you have a situation where people are holding back because they don't know how, you're going to behave, or they don't know, what you stand for, etc. Ultimately, the potential of the opportunity is going to be either not realized at all or realized only partially,
Yeah,
and the journey is going to be painful, right? Now, you get plenty of pain anyway coming your way from, just life and the complexities of, undertaking new things.
of course.
But, pain together, I guess, with clear, targets and values is so much better because then you learn from that. And I think it's also important that piece, which is it's very hard, I think, to grow. At least I speak personally. Um, I don't think I personally grow much when things are easy, right? You kind of have a normal day, and yeah, okay, maybe you spend some time meditating on the good things, etc., etc., but maybe you have not been put to the test. When things are tough, that's where you really discover who you really are. And by the way, I don't say it with the judgment, right? Because you discover who you really are, and look, you might fail, uh, multiple times, and you might say, look, I know I believe in this. I really believe in this, and this particular time, I was not able to stand up to what I believed in.
Hmm.
And why is that, right? And it could be for a great thing, it could be for a tough, difficult thing. It doesn't really matter. But as you go through that difficult moment, it's a test of who you really are. And even if you fail, you learn, and hopefully next time you say, you know what, I'm not going to compromise on that. I might compromise on this and this because we are in a society. But it's really important to know what you compromise on, what you don't compromise on, and
Yeah.
learn from these painful moments.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And it's interesting. A couple of thoughts. One is the point that you made about how it's harder to grow when things are easy, I think is so clear. And I talk a lot about this with, our comfort zone exists for a reason. Sometimes you need to retrench and recharge your
Sure.
batteries, but you got to get through that discomfort place to get into growth.
Right.
That's when it really happens. And so maybe the courage is somehow the courage is wrapped up in the courage to embrace the discomfort to get to that zone where the good stuff can really happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes. And it can be as simple for your listeners. It's also could be seen as like, okay, what challenges do you take? Right? Are you going to take a role that it's, literally the fifth time that you do the same role over and over? And it's not, there's no right or wrong, by the way, right? I want to emphasize that. But if you do the same thing that you've done 5 other times, it's probably maybe in that particular part of your life is the right thing to do because you need to recharge maybe on other dimensions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you constantly do in all parts of your life, always what you have done and what feels easy, are you really growing?
yeah.
And you put yourself in situations where you can make a bet on yourself. And if you fail, you learn. And if you don't fail, you learn too.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting what you say because I agree with you that people that there's no one path that's right for everybody. And there are some people that find comfort in doing what they know how to do it well, continue
Absolutely.
to repeat it. But I think sometimes they downplay the risk in staying in the same place because they
Right.
may want to stay in the same place, but the world moves, the market moves,
Exactly.
the customers evolve. And so there's danger in doing that. Without purpose
Yeah. And
sometimes.
awareness, I would say also,
Yeah.
right? Um, and again, there's so many things in life that happen. And again, there's no right or wrong. I think it's the intentionality of your actions that really matters. And look, in this particular part of your life, that role might make a lot of sense. But always think about, okay, what do I think I'm gonna, where am I gonna get challenged? Uh, and I don't mean challenged in a negative way. I mean challenge just out of my routine. And you can see it in, we are built as human beings to be challenged, right? Our muscles need to be challenged in order to grow. And I think, our humanity needs to do the same, either in the personal level or, at the larger level.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many levels to this. I mean, something that you said sparked for me too. And you said, it's these times, the challenging times, that we really have to tap into our courage and rise to the occasion and try new things, that we learn so much about ourselves, but other people learn from about us too. If we're in a leadership role and other people are watching how we handle the successes and the failures, and failure is something that didn't hit the goal. It's only a failure if you don't learn from it.
Right.
um, it's interesting because I realized too, when I was in the corporate world, the times that I got the most, I don't know, accolades, I think, in my career, was handling the most difficult things that you
Right.
would never want to repeat. But looking back on them, you're glad you went through them.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because when you look at them, I'm like, oh my God, what did I put myself into, right? And then you realize that, you know, 2 years later, 3 years later, you're looking at that time, you're like, that was the best time ever, right? And I
Yeah.
see that because, a lot of times during these times, the bonds that you create with, your team members are so unique, right? Because you are in that trench and nobody else other than you and the team that is with you in that trench knows what it feels like, right? So you have these unspoken language, unspoken sensations that when you see them, they all of a sudden lighten up, and you're like, oh yes, we went through this together, and look what that generated for patients. Look what I learned, and look where it put me today. Or that really didn't work out, right? What did I learn from that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the fact that you're able still to connect with them, I think is proof that the journey, frankly, was even more important than the destination per se.
Well, and that's what it's all about. I mean, I think over my, 30 plus year career in pharma, there are some brands that I worked on that were very important to me at the time. I'm not sure I can even recall their names, but it's the people and the experiences. I mean, when you and I worked together, I remember taking on that opportunity, and there was a big co-promotion, co-marketing, co-development deal with another company,
Right,
very different company than our company, which I
right,
saw as a tremendous opportunity. But I remember other people saying to me, this relationship has been really troubled in the past. Are you sure you want to take this on?
right.
And you and I were partners in doing this. It's like a shining moment for me in my career in terms of fulfillment, working with those partners towards helping patients and the ways we work through challenges and things. It was terrific opportunity.
It was. And look, I still have conversations with my counterpart.
I was
He's a
wondering.
friend. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a dear friend of mine.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember the first time we met each other. We I don't know how, but magically the conversation started to go more philosophical than practical, right? And I remember, but he and I were talking about, you know, what would life mean on the last day, right? And I remember he was like saying to me that, on the last day, if what he and I remember about our relationship was that we jointly led a brand into 3 billion or for whatever the number is, right? We both said that would be probably a pretty sad day and a pretty bad way to go, right? But if instead on the last day we thought about, hey, I learned so much from that person. I was there for him or her when, things were really, really tough, and she or he was there for me when things were really, really tough. And together we created this thing that helped so many patients, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because of all of that, we would have totally exceeded the financial targets. And it's that direction, right? It's like from the values, from
Yeah.
the relationship, from the care, putting patients at the center, that the results come from. And I think when things go the other direction, it's very difficult, right? Because you're going from numbers to values, which is a very difficult equation to solve. And if the number changes, your values changes. Whereas, you know, the other way around, values stay, and hopefully the numbers usually long term adjust to what you stand for.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's wonderful, and it doesn't surprise me knowing the people that you're talking about, but the fact that you and this partner went so deep, you got to know each other's values right away before you had the other things to layer on, before
Right.
you had to make tough decisions together. And what occurs to me, Samuele, is if we have the courage to really sort of lead through our values, all the things that we've talked about, the consistency that businesses need, the people need to know what to expect of us. But the bottom line is it's easier because you're just bringing yourself to the initiative and being true to who you are. You're not having to think about, wait a minute, what persona am I putting on? Who am I trying to please here? You're just being true to yourself.
Yes, and I think you're right. It's certainly easier. What I would say though is it's easier in the long term. I think it's significantly harder in the short term.
Oh,
Uh,
say
and,
more.
and by that I mean that, you know, say that you are in a situation and it's your first day on the job and the business is way behind target, and you get significant challenges from all parts of the organization. You know, your own team is new. I mean, you're new to the team, they don't know you, et cetera, et cetera. And you have a very, very massive deadline that is literally the next day, or just very time pressed situation. In those situations, um, it is hard to say, hey guys, time out, let me tell you, tell me about you first, right? Tell me you as a human being,
Yeah.
tell me about you. And the person might look at you like, are you out of your mind? We're losing God knows how much money every day. And you want me to talk about, you know, me for like 30 minutes? I don't even have time to get a coffee. You want me to talk about this stuff? So that's what I mean, right? And I think that takes courage, right? That's going back to the beginning of the conversation. It takes courage to say, hey guys, whatever you know emergency you have, unless it's like really life threatening, right? But whatever emergency you have, let's spend just a little bit up front just defining what do we believe in collectively, right? And then let's hold ourselves accountable for the rest of the journey to these things, right? And if we deviate, let's have a conversation, because look, life happens. We're going to have challenging times. Some of these values will be tested, right? And so, but let's agree that these are what we stand for, and then let's see it. So doing that in the short term is harder, but if you do it, then the long term gets easier.
That's an interesting way to think about it because I mean, you're making an investment and
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
it does pay off. It's interesting. So we're talking about leading teams and how we set the culture. And I know you've led very big teams. Thinking about individuals that you've worked with and people, because I know mentoring and things is important to you. People that you're helping to develop, if you see that tapping into a bit more courage would be beneficial to them, how do you help them get started with that? What environment do you create?
It's a great question. Yeah, I think it's more the environment that I think. Well, there's certainly an environment that I can help create, right? If I am head of that unit or whatever. Uh, but I think it's also important to think about the environment that I want to encourage that person to put themselves in, that
Hmm.
is not something that I have, direct oversight over. Um, because I think it's very important, if we have done a reasonable job as leaders to let go. And by that I mean to let the person say, hey, maybe in this environment, because of the way that we discuss things, the way that we set up front, and the values that we believe in, and the way we've operated, et cetera, et cetera, you know, you have been able to feel that you can take some risk, and be courageous, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, I'm sure it's true that many of my teams maybe didn't feel that, right? But let's stay there for a second. But I think then it's like, hey, maybe you can take a stretch assignment on that person's team, who maybe has a very different style. And it's not better or worse, it's just a different style. And then how do you show courage in that environment? Uh, Staying true to your values. And that's, I think, a very important piece because, you can still be absolutely true to your values, but changing the style that you take to be true to those values, right? So, and I think actually we do a disservice to our team members if we kind of, um, even plant the seed that there's only one way of leading with courage, right? There's so many different ways, and at the end of the day, we said leading with courage. So if you hold to your values but you're by yourself, you're not leading anyone, right? So you have to work with people, and usually what I find is that there's so much to learn from others, and you can still be true to your values. Now you have to be very clear on what are your boundaries, and things you're going to compromise on, great. Things you're not going to compromise on, just be true to that.
Yeah. No, and it's so important to support that. And I like what you're saying because it's, for anybody coming up, it's about defining who you are for yourself and being true to that. And that core stays consistent no matter the
Right.
situation that you're in.
Correct. Correct.
I'm not sure if actually you probably have encountered this situation, but a question I get sometimes from folks I work with is somebody on their team, if they're trying to instill the sense that it's okay to take risks, to lead through your values in a courageous way, and that may mean
Yeah.
taking risks, but they want to give them space to do, to find their own way.
Yeah.
There's a line between taking risks and being reckless.
Sure.
And I wonder what your thoughts are around that.
Well, that's where I think it's really important to define the rules of engagement,
Mhm.
right? And by that I mean, um, being very clear with, you know, the associate, the person of, what is it that we are trying to achieve, right? What are you tasked with? And, where do you have freedom within obviously the legal and compliance framework that we have to operate with, and where you don't. So I'll give you a specific example, right? So say that we have a new commercial strategy that needs to, get created. Um, you know, we might want to say that, look, you have certain levels of freedom on, how you consider the structure of the field force, or the team, and how we're going to go towards these customers, et cetera, et cetera. But obviously you have no say on pricing decisions, right? Because
Mhm.
that's centralized, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you should also be talking about these type of things with certain customers, right? Because there's clear rules, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's very important, particularly as you engage with associates that maybe are earlier in their tenure, to be explicit about, this is the area where you're playing, and by all means, if you have ideas that are beyond that, come and talk to me, right? Because you might see things that I'm not seeing and that are awesome potentially. So let's definitely get it. So don't feel constrained in terms of how you think about it, but just know that you're outside the box. So if you get outside the box before you act, come and talk to us. But within the box, update me on these metrics every week or whatever it is, and let's check how your progress, what I can do to help you within the box, so that hopefully you give the right level of empowerment,
Yeah.
but also oversight. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, yeah,
That feels so right because you're helping them to understand sort of what the boundaries that are unmovable, that are
right,
firm, that they could work within, but give them space within that. But I also like the guidance that you suggested of, if you're not sure, if you have an idea, let's talk it through, which is a good
right,
practice for anything.
for
When
anything,
you're
of
in
course.
a creative space, get out of your own head and get some input from others. I also like what you said about, I asked the question from a standpoint of as the leader, but you're so right that we need to look at it both ways. How we set the environment as a leader, but for the folks that are listening that are coming up in their careers, and most people have a team and have a boss, so it kind of
Right.
works both ways. How do you take that personal responsibility to push the boundaries in the right way, to make sure, I mean, most businesses need to grow and evolve, so you need to try things that haven't done before.
Right.
How do you give yourself the permission to push the boundaries and know where that is?
Yes, there was actually, when I was at McKinsey, there was a great line that I remember they used to teach us when we were, first or second year associates, and it was obligation to dissent, which basically meant, do not take everything that I say, meaning like the senior person, right, as absolute gospel, etc. If you disagree, you have an obligation to make that disagreement known. And I will listen to you respectfully. And then I will explain to you whether I understand first, and then I agree or disagree and why, so that you can grow, I can grow, and maybe that point of view helps us get better overall. But I think it's such an important principle that I try to honor still to this day.
I love it. Obligation to dissent. So let's play that out for just a minute, Samuele. That was their intention that they laid out. Did you see that coming through into action and practice?
I did. I mean, I've been very fortunate, in my career, where, I would say most of the times the obligation to dissent worked like it should have worked. Now, inevitably, right, you have situations where, that didn't work, and other consequences happen. But most of the times, yes. But that's, I think, where also it's important to then anchor back to what we discussed at the very beginning, which is I'm not dissenting because, the obligation to dissent is a sport, right? I'm dissenting because that I need to have, 20 obligations to dissent in a day. Otherwise, I'm not performing, right? No, I'm dissenting because there's something that you're saying or something that you're doing that goes against either my values or the strategy that we agreed to, or an opportunity that I think I'm seeing that you're not seeing, right? So I have an obligation as part of the team to share that with you respectfully, and you have an obligation to listen to me, right? Because I might be the first year associate on the group, but I'm the guy who's talking to the customer every day. And you're sitting in the ivory tower, 300 days a week, a year, and you're not, in touch with that. So I think it's important that that obligation to dissent is anchored on your values, right? And that courage to dissent, if you want to maybe evolve the terminology, is anchored on that.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's really powerful thought, because I mean, it's a great example of setting that culture for the right reasons, because in the end, it allows you to grow as a team, of course, but better serve your customers.
Yes, and again, we have to learn on how to do it in a way that is effective, right? And also, there could be like big dissensions, small dissensions, and then it could easily become a full day worth of, hey, I disagree with this and I disagree with that and I disagree. So it takes a little bit of practice to figure out, when to and how to do it. But I think it's on balance, I would rather have somebody dissenting, right? Even if it's maybe something that is a little trivial, than somebody holding back, because then what happens is that then they disengage, right? And then maybe the next thing that they should have dissented on, that they think now it's trivial, in reality is huge, and you missed it because you created a culture where like, you know what, he said he believes in this, but he doesn't really believe it. So, I'm not going to speak.
Yeah. Especially if you are if the words are coming out that this is,
right.
You have this obligation, that the actions have to back it up. What a great example. I really appreciate you sharing that. I think it's a great way for us to wrap up. So, Samuele, let me thank you for sharing your wisdom with me and our listeners. And very grateful to you for your time, and just such a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Randi. My pleasure as well. All the very best.
Thanks so much for listening to Fulfilling Career, Happy Life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, follow, rate, and review. Do all the things to show your support for this podcast. It helps other professionals who want to feel more energized about their work again find us. And if you want to take this thinking further, please follow me on LinkedIn, where I share content on a regular basis. You can also get on my email list by downloading the Career Satisfaction Assessment or through my website. All these links are in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. I truly appreciate that you make the time for yourself to listen to the show. See you next week.